Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another day of the Better Events podcast. We are so happy to be with you. And in today's episode, it's going to be a fun one because this is a live podcast from our virtual day of the Better Events conference. We are talking about the event stories that still haunt us. We've done this type of theme every October for the last few years, but we still have more stories to share with you as well as lessons learned. So let's go ahead and get into it.
Welcome to the Better Events Podcast. Join two event strategists, Logan Clements and Mary Davidson, who believe we can all create, host, and attend better events. In this podcast, you will learn about event strategy and actions that you can use today as an event host, planner, or manager. Hear directly from the people who are creating innovative and inspiring events today and tomorrow, and grow your business along the way. Now, let's get started, and thanks for listening to the Better Events Podcast.
Alrighty, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Better Events Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Logan Clements, and I'm joined by fellow co-host Mary Davidson. And we are coming to you live from the Better Events Conference virtual day. Yes, we are recording this here on October 1st. And Mary, just such a fun day. I don't know. I'm like, I can't even pick a favorite part. They're all too amazing. I was telling Mary earlier between sessions that I feel like I already have middle school nostalgia for the day as we're actively in it, because there just have been so many amazing moments and interactions with people. I don't know, Mary, do you have a part that's jumping out to you?
I agree. I loved so many things, but the AI workshops I think were so awesome. And I have to caveat that by saying I'm usually the person, if I go to a conference, who skips the AI stuff, which like is of no offense. It's just something that like I gotta kind of force myself to get into. But I loved these so truly that like actually means something because there were so many tangible tips that I can actually use. It wasn't too overwhelming. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, for me, again, it's hard to pick a favorite. The lightning talks were so much fun. And then I really loved our panel discussion. I feel biased because I was moderating it, but I just felt like the way that our panelists responded to the different questions, it really hit all the marks that I was hoping for when we came up with that session idea. So enough about the conference though, because you'll keep hearing us talk about it because the in-person day is not till December 18th. But Mary, as always, let's do our conversation starter. Would you rather spend a night in a haunted house or a corn maze?
I hate both of these options. If I had to choose, I'd say a cord maze. Logan, I know we both don't like haunted houses, so I can't even imagine the world in which that would occur. A corn maze, though, because I don't know if it's like not creepy. Could it be like a peaceful night under the stars? Maybe it could be. So that's what I'm gonna choose. What about you, Logan? Haunted house or corn maze?
Thank you for clarifying, because I was nervous you meant haunted house or haunted corn
Haunted
maze.
corn
And
maze.
you know
Yeah.
this about me. We both hate haunted things. So yeah, I'd have to say corn maze. And hopefully it's beautiful and no scary things are there with us.
Here's hoping, but also I never want to actually have this experience. So it's okay. Let us know if you are listening to this on the podcast, what you would prefer, or if you're listening to this live today at the conference, what would you prefer? We want to hear it. Okay, so we do a little tidbit about why we choose each of our topics. Today we chose this topic because we are feeling spooky. It's that time of year. It's October, like Logan said, and there is just such a great way to grow by learning from our mistakes and the horror stories and things that we have. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to share some event stories that still haunt us to this day. And if you're with us live today, we want to hear your stories too. So this is one of your shout outs. Start thinking. We want you to put them in the chat because we are going to have a section where we're sharing them. If you want to be anonymous, put that in there too. But we're excited to hear what you have to say. This is similar to our event horror stories episodes. We did number 28, number 128, and number 178. So there's some creepy theme that's going on there. Unfortunately, this one is not going to be an episode number with the number 8 in it, but we did this before. And what I thought was interesting, Logan, I was listening back to them, is I think our first one that we did was during the pandemic. And so our horror stories were all virtual. They were about all of the tech and virtual things. And of course, there's still some crossover that we've had each time in that's relevant to that as well. But I'm excited to hear what we have to share today. So with all of that spiel, let's go ahead and get into it. So as kind of an introduction, Logan, when you think of an event that still haunts you, what's the first image or sound that pops into your mind?
This one, I'm like, I took a little more general, but I feel like it's more an image, and it's someone's head just whipping around like really fast and making eye contact with you. And that is like can apply to several situations, but it just in general at an event, if anyone is like quickly moving and looking at you, it's usually not a good thing. And just saying it, as we were talking about this earlier, Barry, my like I always joke too, it's also like my heart drops to my butt, and there's just this like stomach drop I get that then my spidey senses kick in and we got to figure it out. But it's just like that physical reaction, and a lot of it stems from the head turn. How about you, Mary? What's your image or sound?
I'm already feeling a lot of emotions, I just have to say, like, my heart's beating faster. Maybe it's because 'cause we're doing this live, I don't know, but I'm, like, having some anxiety, we haven't even started. Um, Mine, I think, is similar in a sense. The image that I imagine is, like, you as an event professional having, like, a blank stare on your face, like, you feel dumbfounded, like, that kind of look and feeling, because someone has brought something up to you or asks you a question and it's the first time that you've ever heard it. Like, you're on site and someone's like, "Well, so and so's here." And you're like, "Who's that?" That type of feeling, and then you're like, "Whose fault is this? I don't know." But that situation.
Yeah, I think we picked a really stress-free topic to end our day with here with this. And now a word from one of our partners. We are thrilled to announce our monthly series that we are doing with Audio Engineers Northwest. You might remember Sean Walker if you joined us for our Better Events conference in Seattle or our virtual day last year. But we are going to be teaming up every month to bring you a different audio or production tip from Sean, who is doing the best of the best audio and AV production work in the industry. So without further ado, here is your monthly tip courtesy of Audio Engineers Northwest.
Hey, it's Sean Walker with Audio Engineers Northwest. This week's tip is about feedback. The question we got was, one thing I can do to avoid audio feedback during an event? I would say that pretty much sounds like a smaller event. So make sure that your talent is behind the speakers. Your microphone, your talent, they're behind the speakers. The speakers are not playing into the microphone and creating feedback. That will be a huge, huge advantage to keep feedback to a minimum. All right, have a good week. Make some good events.
Thanks, Sean. We love that pro tip. And as always, listeners, if you want to learn more about what Sean and his team do, go and visit audioengineersnorthwest.com, and we have put the link in our show notes or in our video below. Without further ado, let's get back to the episode. I know we also hear from listeners too. Like, we hope you feel like on the podcast, we talk about when things go wrong, but we're also going to be talking about how we reacted to it and solved it. So hopefully, again, when things happen to you, you're ready for them. But next question, Mary, what's your personal definition of an event horror story? Is it a planning nightmare, a tech fail, or something unexpected happening on site?
I think yes, all of the above, absolutely. Um, but for me, I think it's something that, like, as a planner, I love to plan. And so if it's something that I can't predict or have created like a backup plan for, something we've thought about before the event, anything other than that, that to me is my definition of a horror story because it cannot be planned for.
Yeah, mine I think would be like an unforeseen circumstance, and sometimes it can feel like that perfect storm. And thinking back on some of these stories I want to share and what still haunts me to this day, like I can't go back and say, "Oh, that was my fault," but it was something that happened that then impacted things that we had planned. And it's that lovely rugby term, but this knock-on effect of like, if this changes, then that impacts us, which impacts others, and on and on. And I feel like the difference between like a horror and non-horror story is just sometimes like the gravity of the situation or the how surprising it is. Like, you're like, I had planned A, B, C, and D. I did not account for monkeys jumping into the venue. I did not have monkeys burst into a venue that I was working. But like, it's something, some of those I'm always like, how would I have foreseen that? And a lot of these stories at the end of the day have to be like, I couldn't. Like, now it goes in my toolkit of things I can think about, but like a lot of these things, they just come out of right field. So again, your listeners, if you are watching us live here in the conference, feel free to drop your horror stories. You can just do a sentence. The more, I guess, obscure you are, the harder it might be for us, or we can just assume and fill in the blanks. But feel free to share what is haunting you. But Mary, I'm going to start with you. What's an event story that still haunts you to this day?
Okay, I'm trying to figure out where to start because my brain's like all these different ones. I'm going to start with a recent weird one that I have alluded to Logan once, but Logan, you're gonna love this because I know you did the first time I shared it with you. So we are working on an event right now. It is the first time that they have done an event, I believe. And so as part of what they do as an organization is like food service related. And so we learned in one of the meetings that one of the things they wanted to do was to butcher a lamb on site at the event. And so, caveat, I'm not leading this event. One of our team members is. So she brings this to our attention. We're all like, "What? Okay." And so I have to caveat it because it does actually kind of align with like what they do. But to do that in an event, that's like we really don't recommend that you're going to do that, especially because it's your first event and just considering who might attend, you don't know how people are going to react to that type of situation. So don't. But also the venue, I'm sure, won't even allow you to do that. So there's like a whole level of like, this isn't going to work, but interesting idea situation. So that has not happened because we were able to advise them not to. The event also has not happened yet. So we'll see. We'll see what happens at the end of the day.
That is, I mean, we're talking about horror stories, but I was like, that actually involves like blood and gore. And like, I don't know, when you first told me that story, I was like, oh yeah, some people like to like live cut, like, or like not live, but like cut meat for people. So I'm like, oh, it's a rack of lamb. And then you're like, no, live lamb. It's like,
That's where we've landed though, is like the cutting meat. That's the compromise.
we like
So
the cutting meat. Cutting meat's totally fine. That's a whole part of, I once got to witness, unrelated to events, got to witness a like luau, a traditional Hawaiian luau, where they like, unfortunately, they kill the pig and then they roast it for you. And the entire time I had to be like, I love bacon, I love bacon, I love bacon. Because it was a lot if you're not used to livestock and all of that. But Mary, that's a good haunting story. My first one, again, listeners of the pod, you might have heard this before, but it still stands in the top 5 worst days of my career ever. And this was working an international sporting event where it felt like a comedy of errors. It was day 1 of competition. We were prepped, we were prepared, and we had a vendor that did not test their equipment ahead of time. They were not on my list. They were not under me to check that they tested their equipment, but their equipment had to talk to some of our equipment. And they claimed that our music that we were playing or our talking on the microphone was impacting their equipment. And their equipment was important to like the sport we were playing. Now, I am not a scientist. I am not an audio engineer, but I was like, I don't think that's how sound waves work and your radio waves, but like maybe, but no, like we've been playing them for all these prep days, like everything was fine. But in the moment, we didn't have time to have that back and forth. It was heightened emotion. So it was like, okay, if you think it's impacting, we have to just cut it down. We're going to go really low and we're going to limit what we say on the mic. Well, that had the knock-on effect of then it's like, well, we're not entertaining fans and you're actively in the event. So you don't have time to like huddle all the key people and be like, this is why it's happening. So I'm just making copious notes, but kind of just being like, hang on for dear life. At one point it became so much because we kept getting it. That guy, the gentleman kept coming up and yelled at my audio person, yelled at me, yelled at another person. And I finally had to look at him and I was like, this is not the place. Let's just get through today. And I think I had 2 minutes to myself over the course of a 16 or 18-hour day where I went to the bathroom and I sat there for a second and I said, I might cry. And then I had a moment where I was like, that's not going to help me right now because I've got so much going on. And so it was like, let's just power through, guys. And then it was like the sport went long, so we didn't get a break like we normally do. So we just powered through. The end of the day, my announcer like pulled me aside and was like, I just want to say you're, as a producer, like other producers would have screamed at us. And I was like, thank you for saying that because or cried. He did mention or cry. And I was like, well, I suppressed that part, but also what would yelling have done? It wouldn't have helped. And so I got home, I walk into my hotel room door. The minute the door closes, I am ugly crying, like real gross, guys. It just, whatever, just imagine, my body was just like, oh my gosh, that was so much. And I just remember calling my partner to like, I needed someone who could unfiltered hear everything that was crazy that happened that day. And I remember going, how am I supposed to put this in an email to like my boss to just like summarize what had happened that day? And he gave me the best advice that I still apply it when things get real stressful is like, he's like, just take a shower, run some hot water and like, give yourself a minute. Then sit down, take a breath and write what you need to write. Like, cause I was like, I can't possibly like figure this out. So, long story short, it was a longer event. I will say things got better after that day, but like, I am right back in it telling the story. Like I feel the stress in my chest of just how stressful this day was. And one of those moments that like, it is true. Mary has quoted Kelly Clarkson on this podcast before that what doesn't kill you make you stronger, because it was an armor I had for the rest of the event where I went, it literally couldn't have been worse than that. Like, so it was like, I got through that. Oh, tiny hiccup here. We got this. Like, so there was a positive side to it, but I did have to send a report and, had some conversations with people, and I just documented everything. Was really my lesson learned, was making sure I documented when things happened, mainly calling out the fact that we'd been nice and early and tested things, and that person chose to show up like 10 minutes before competition started. Like, there were so many things that, I could go on and on, Mary, but that's my haunting story.
It is haunting, and I think we can tell that you are feeling those emotions in real time again. There's something too, there's like a magical barrier when you walk into your hotel room where it's just like everything, just all the emotions come out. So I have experienced that as well. But I'm glad that you were able to power through also, because like you said, that was such a long stint of an event. So hopefully you don't have to deal with that again. But is when I was working an event that was in San Diego, and in San Diego, I'm trying to figure out how specific I want to get right now as I'm saying it out loud. I think I will. I'll get specific because it's been a long time. I was working with VIPs. One of my VIPs was Baron Davis. Baron Davis is on Dancing with the Stars right now, and so I was watching Dancing with the Stars innocently the other day, and he comes on, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just have this memory that just hits me in the face, and I'm like, I'm going to share this as a horror story. And so we were working with him, and this is just a transportation issue at the end of the day. So we had to get him from point A to point B. And we, I think, thought that we scheduled transportation. I don't exactly remember because it was a long time ago, but there was some issue. Long story short, we had to get him to that venue ASAP. He was going to be on the stage in like 10 minutes. And so we're like, how do we get Baron Davis to the stage? And so we called him an Uber. We didn't call him like a nice Uber. We called him like your basic Uber. And it was like a really tiny car, like not just a sedan, but like a small version of a sedan. And Baron Davis is a basketball player, so he's very, very tall. And so he gets in this car with this random woman, and we're not even there, by the way. We book it for him, and like his manager is telling him like, what car to get in, what license plate to look for, and he gets in the car. And this woman who's driving him just has no idea who he is. And that's probably good. That's fine. That's good and that's fine. But it's just like the most unglamorous way that one could get a VIP from one point to the other point. And he gets there, and he's actually like really nice. So that's also why I'm telling this story, is because he handled it really well. And he was like, thanks for taking care of me. And it was all good things. But just the horror when I saw his face on the TV, I was like, remember that one time we put him in a tiny car he could barely fit in? Wouldn't want to do that again. So that's my horror story.
Oh, I just picture a large human in small car is just, that is funny. And it's one of those, I'm sure you like clocked and were like, this will be funny eventually. It's just not right now while it's stressful, which is what I believe a lot of things. I'm always like, just give me time. I'm sure I'll think fondly back on these days. My next one of a story that haunts me. I did go back in the archives for this one. The first one that still was fresh is like in the last 2 years. So still very fresh. But this one I totally had forgotten about till I saw the event title name on my list of events I've done. And I went, oh gosh, this was when I worked in Shanghai. I was working a financial event, and it was the concept of we loaded in. So some of the spaces the day before, but the big ballroom, we weren't going to be able to get in until midnight at midnight, because there was another event in that room during the day. And so I went, and we'd done some prep work. We're like, great, things look good. They're on board. We don't need to physically be here to supervise this handover. They were like, our production company is going to talk to their production company. They're all good to go. No problem. And I don't remember now how I found out about it, because it was more the visual of what happened. But at some point, whether I walked by the room or my colleague did, around 11 p.m. midnight when this transfer was supposed to happen, and we noticed like the other event hadn't even started breaking down yet. And it was like, oh no. And so they're starting to load out, and we're like looking at the clock, because we had vendors coming at like fancy people coming in at like 6 a.m. to set up their table to then sit and do these big general sessions. And this was like a financial event where lots of money was being talked about. Somehow this ended up, they got the other company out, but it was like 2 cleaning people in this giant ballroom trying to clean up. Like we found like chicken bones on the floor, and we're just looking, we're like, there's no way they're going to clean this. So me and my colleague grab brooms with these other 2 ladies. So there's 4 of us, and we are sweeping and vacuuming this ballroom floor to try to get it ready so our folks can start laying down stuff. Cause yeah, it was like the loadout team had just like eaten dinner and like left it all over the floor. And we ended up pulling an all-nighter, and I am not an all-nighter person, but we pulled an all-nighter. We got it done. I think maybe we had to make folks wait maybe only about 20, 30 minutes, which honestly at the state things were in 6 hours prior, I was like, this is amazing. And then I had to stay up all day to work the event. And I joke by like 6 p.m. whenever this event was over, I turned to my colleague and I was like, can you see the heat rising off of the attendees' heads? She was like, no, but I think I'm also delirious. And I was like, yeah, I'm not built to stay up all night. But it was one I was really proud of us pulling it off together. But we'd gotten milkshakes before we thought we were going home the night before, and then got roped into stuff. And we went back to the milkshake place, and the person serving us was the same person. And we were like, fun fact, we haven't slept since we saw you yesterday. And he didn't think it was as fun of a fact as we thought it was, that we'd had like a 36-hour day, something crazy. It was a lot of hours to be awake.
Nothing solves a horror story like a milkshake. You know what I mean? No, that is terrible. And I remember you sharing that story before, and I still can't even, honestly, I can't even imagine. Like, everybody just take a minute to imagine yourself on the floor picking those things up. Like, that's when we know we are not getting paid enough. So thank you for sharing that, Logan. My next one is when a venue double booked the ballroom that we had reserved. And so they told us, I can't remember how far before the event it was. I feel like it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks. So it was soon enough for us to be able to come up with a backup plan, but also like not really soon enough. Like, marketing and advertising had already gone out and things like that. And so what had happened though is this was just after the pandemic. So during the pandemic, a lot of people would postpone and reschedule their events. And so through this time of change and rescheduling people, that's how somehow in the system, 2 of us got booked in the same ballroom at the same time. And so luckily, and I think this is the true luckily part, is they had another ballroom that was available in the building on a different floor. So we had to kind of figure out like the navigation of that. But we actually ended up really loving the space. And so it could have been way worse. There could have been nothing. Could have been too small to fit everybody that we were counting on, all of those things. But I'm just like so grateful that they had something else available that we could use. But I was talking to someone else the other day, and they shared too that they have had a venue be double booked for them as well on a date that they had reserved. So all of a sudden I was like, how often does this happen? So let us know if this has also happened to you. I'm sure obviously there's room for error in a lot of the things that we do. So yeah, I'm glad it worked out, but it could have been so much worse. And if it had happened where we had to move venues, I don't even know what we would have done. I think we would have just had to like change the whole date completely, to be honest, because it was a huge event. So yikes.
Woo, double booked. Yep, just still sweating over here. This is again, residual stress for you, Mary. That's very lucky that they had a backup space, but also I hope this gives hope to a listener that if you have this scenario, there is ways to push through it. Also, like, you are not alone. You're not the only event that this happens to. But ideally, we wish this to not happen to any of you listeners ever. That hopefully Mary was the only person ever to get double booked, and it will never happen again. Knock on wood. My next horror story is one that story that haunts me still. It doesn't fully haunt me. It was a moment that I enjoyed. This was like when things go wrong, but I'm just a smaller piece of the puzzle. So I know this definitely haunts somebody else more than it haunts me. But the night before a virtual event, we are doing it all in Zoom, and we've been rehearsing, we've been doing all this stuff. Great. All we have left is this one tech check with the most senior executive at the company. That senior executive comes in that tech check. We do that tech check. They then are like, let me watch the video that is going to get screen shared into Zoom. And it's like, okay, we show it. It looks good. It looks decent. It's Zoom. You're sharing a video in Zoom. The video ends, and the executive's like, I don't want to do this in Zoom anymore. We're going to do this in Teams. I think Teams is better. And we're all just like sitting like virtually, and people are just like, this company had recruited all people who know Zoom. Sure, some of us might have known Teams, but like it was all this groundwork had been prepared, and it just got blown up the night before for the session for the next day. And it was an internal event, so like not hard to change the link or whatever. But they're like, everyone to Teams. We're going to Teams. We're going to watch the video in Teams. And I will say, personally, it did not look like it played better in Teams, but to this person, they were so locked in on like Teams is better, Zoom stinks. we're done. We're not going to use Zoom for this session. We're going to use Teams. And the moral of the story was they then came back to the company that had hired me and some other folks, and they were like, yeah, so we're not going to do the event if it's in Teams. We are here for Zoom. We've been practicing Zoom things. Like, that's just, the people who hired me drew that line. I didn't have to be a part of that conversation. That's why it doesn't fully haunt me, because the positive side was we did our other sessions in Zoom. And then that one big session we weren't a part of because it was on Teams. But it was just like a lesson learned where I was like, did no one talk to this person ahead of the night before the event of like, let's lay out the plan? Because it was just an example of like a senior leader coming in and blowing up a lot of preparation that had happened ahead of time. I didn't hear how, they were like, they didn't tell us yes or no if it really went well or not, but it did probably involve a lot of overnight scrambling for the people below them to make it work. But it was just one I was like, wow, lesson learned for me. If I'm ever in that lead role, I am making sure that the head folks are aware of, like, we talk about expectations, and transparency came up on the panel earlier today. So again, a horror story I think keeps other people up because I still got paid the same for what I was doing, and I just didn't have to do that one session. But it was like, I was very happy. I think I was camera off for that meeting at that point, and I was like, ooh. The
Perfect
chat
time
in
to
the
be camera
background
off.
are like,
Yeah.
ooh.
There's nothing like a behind the scenes chat. Let's just also say that it's a special place. Okay, I want to hear more horror stories. So Logan, if you have any burning, but in the meantime, let's share some that we are getting from our audience that's listening in today. So I'll share one, and then Logan, if you want to share one, we'll do a little back and forth. We won't say your name just to give you, a little bit of anonymity. Maybe you don't mind, but if you have some major anxiety about your horror story, we'll just keep it anonymous for you. So our first one that we had come in, let's see here. Okay, I'm just going to read it. So here we go. It was my first year in business, and I was planning a high school party, and we had to transport 150 students via buses to multiple locations. I negotiated the bus pricing, hold on, my screen is shifting as you all comment, which I appreciate. Let's see. Negotiated the best pricing, had the contract sent to the client, and the client changed the date on the contract. So no buses. Oh my gosh. Had to really adjust, and found out later that the change was done by the person on purpose because she didn't want the school to have parties like this. Worst night ever. Oh my gosh.
That is a story that will still haunt you, though. At the end of the day, when you get to find out the cause, like, I will say there's nothing more satisfying than finding out the why, even though if you can't figure it out in the moment. Like, getting to my least favorite thing that happens when things go wrong is if people are just like, that just happens. And you're like, no, it doesn't. And if it did truly just happen, we got to figure out how we would navigate it. But I'm always like, there's a why, there's a something, and I can accept a human solution. That is okay. If you're like, human made bad, type the wrong number, that's okay. But doing it on purpose, I hope you still got compensated, because that is not your fault. But all right, my next one. Again, we're keeping these anonymous. From our chat here, I was working a public event, ticketed and subbed for someone at registration. While I was there, the mayor of the city we were in walked up and clearly assumed, I don't know, there'd be a wreath of flowers or a giant gift basket for her. She had a crazy attitude. And I learned after that she showed up at not the agreed upon time, but they were expecting her, even though there was nothing at the registration desk to give us a heads up. We did our best to get her, the director of the event, get it handled with not the attitude of reverence she was expecting, but she had such an intense attitude. The management team took like 2 hours groveling with her to make her happy before she left. So much needless stress. Also, mayors are not super famous, and I did not understand how we solve for that next time. Oof. I mean, hypothetically, this person, you could like look up the mayor of every city you work an event in and be like, I talk about like a face sheet. That's what I would do for this. And I wouldn't say you need to do that, but like, I guess this is a good example of why you need a face sheet of, which is literally like a piece of paper that has people's pictures and their names. And if it's a hard to pronounce name, even if you could put it phonetically in there, that you want folks on your event team to recognize. I do that for some events I do that have volunteers where I want to make sure the speakers, if like one of the lead speakers accidentally comes to the registration desk and not the speaker check-in, they're not treated like everyone else. But I would say this isn't on you. That's definitely on the organizers for not giving you the heads up.
I love the comment of mayors aren't always super famous. So it's like, yeah, we don't always know who everybody is. And that's the sense with a lot of VIPs, I think, right? They come and you have no idea, who they are or not. So face sheet, great tip. One more I'll read from our chat. I had a similar experience. Oh no. We booked the whole ballroom, but found out the morning of the event that they had another group in one section, about a third of it. It was a scramble to adjust. We ended up doing a buffet instead of plated because the space was tight. Also, my hours of planning, the seating chart, and meal orders went out the window. That does give me a lot of anxiety. I'm glad they were able to fit both of you in, but I can just imagine like cutting off a third or of your event is a significant amount. So I hate that for you, but I'm glad it still was able to happen.
Yeah, these are all stories that are haunting. And yeah, I'll be happy when we're done this episode because then my hands can stop sweating for everybody. I'm very empathetic. Mary, I've got one more haunt that I want to share because this could probably apply to anybody. But my haunting story is a poor communication with a client. And this client was the kind of client that liked every email had to be on a separate thread. Like there was no chain of like, hey, let's talk about decor and we're just all replying to the same thread. Nope. Every time it was a new email. Every single time. And it was this like infuriating. We had the nice chats of like, so if you're going to respond about this auction item, why don't we just do it in the same thread as the auction item? We've already talked about it. And it was like, there was just no way. We tried talking about it nice. We didn't really have the power in that relationship. And I was younger too at the time that I didn't know I should just say, please communicate exactly this way. But it made it so inefficient to plan this event because I couldn't respond to a single email each day until I had read all of the emails because there was a chance the response or the answer was in a separate email at a separate time. And that is when I learned that tracking my time was super, super important because we burned through hours so much faster than I think that was anticipated. And a lot of it was down to this poor communication style. And I honestly didn't really have a solve. It turned into like, we just got to get through this event and just do it. But it is something that I've carried with me as like, you want to talk about communication preferences and how often are you expecting responses? Or are you a text person or an email person or a phone call person? They like seeing your face. They also like seeing us physically in their office. This was pre-COVID, seeing us physically in their office. And it was like, your office is far away. It doesn't make sense. You're wasting our time, like our hours to get there, be there and come back. So, but I still feel like I get haunted when someone accidentally does it. I don't experience it regularly now, but I promise you, Mary, it was every email was a separate email.
I can imagine. We've had a client that they only fill out the subject line, like, and there's no text in the email, and the text is just like, "Is DJ confirmed?" or just the subject line. And so I understand. I understand we don't love it, but setting expectations is important. So you did definitely share that tip from there as well. And so we've been sharing a lot of horror stories with you all today, but we want to make sure that we spend a little bit of time just to talk about the lessons learned from them in general, because this is the tangible part. This is now like, yes, we are all in this together, but here's what you can actually do and tips and tricks that you can take away with you. So Logan, overall about these experiences, what did they teach you about planning or risk management in events?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, each time something's happened, I feel like I've added a note to myself of something else to check. But also, the more I've done this, the more I've realized there is also like I'm beating myself up less and less. I feel like I would spend more time when I was first starting my event career that I would really obsess over something not going perfectly. And I've more now accepted like I don't ever promise a client it's a perfect event. I always my pep talk to them is always the event's going to happen. Or when I do tennis, I'm like, tennis will be played, the event will happen, and you just have to promise that you have the right people in the right roles to make those decisions that they need to make when the time comes. And so being more comfortable with things going wrong while also having all of your prepared list of being more specific about what we're preparing for and what we're doing, and like that loadout, that story of overnight being like very specific of like I need to have someone here at load in right when it starts, so that if we knew from the jump that things were late, that could have helped get ahead of things until it was like 1 a.m. and you're like, I can't call someone and wake them up at this point. So you get those like specific things that become your list. And we've talked about this, Mary. There's sometimes when someone has a very specific question about like your event or something that I'm always like, who hurt you? Like, it's definitely the opposite. Like if they're like, you're not allowed to have monkeys here. And you're like, I won't be having monkeys, but also can we talk about the monkeys? I want to know who brought monkeys to your event? Like, and it's like, we all here at the conference, I'm sure could swap our stories of like the craziest things are married. Like there's a lamb and we will slaughter the lamb. It's like, oh, not had that before. Like, but it's in your toolkit. So I think knowing you can learn from everything, you can add it to your list, you can ask these questions, and yet things are still going to be unexpected. And that's kind of the cool part. I never say I wish things go wrong, but I also think that's where we as planners and producers and managers get to show our stripes and show how we react to situations. But that was very long-winded, Mary. I'm so sorry about. Clearly, I'm passionate about haunting stories.
No, I obviously I agree with everything you said. I think I'll just like simply add, don't make assumptions. We were just talking about this with the Beats Working podcast, which is another event podcast that you can check out. But with Libby and Elise, shout out to you. They're also here at the conference, but not making assumptions. And I think it's so easy to say that, but then we still do it. So it's just to double check everything. And once again, like you said, Logan, I think that's part of the reason why we are in the roles that we are, is to really do the due diligence and double check all of those things. And so yes, not everything is in our control, but at least we can do our best. I know some of the examples I shared, I was like, if we maybe just confirmed like who was doing something, or like didn't make assumptions about if we're going to be killing an animal on site or not, then maybe we could work through those things a little bit. So I agree.
Yeah. No, it's yeah. You want to make those notes. Future you will thank you. But second to last question here, Mary. How do you bounce back mentally after something goes wrong or off the rails?
Okay, so I like this question because, like, to be open with you all, this is something I'm still working through. Like, I haven't quite figured out how to navigate this situation because I really take things personally. I absolutely am a people pleaser. So when something goes wrong, it is really hard for me to get over. But I know that about myself. And so I've been trying to do things that help. But with that, ChatGPT, I remembered a scenario recently that I was having a hard time getting over. So I went to ChatGPT and I was like, can you give me like an affirmation, or like something that will help me just feel better when these circumstances arise? And it gave me a good one. So I'm going to share it with you. It was to say to yourself, this is one moment in a long career. It feels big right now, but it won't always. And I was like, yes, just some perspective. That is what helps me bounce back a little bit. We say it a lot. We're not saving lives, but events are sometimes so important to the people who are hosting them that it feels like their life. So I don't want to minimize anyone's, their grand feelings about their event. But at the end of the day, there's another event that's going to come. Many people aren't even going to know that the issue was an issue. And I think that helps me minimize it a little bit. Logan, what about you? How do you mentally bounce back?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love that, Mary. That's a really great reframing and a great use of AI to be like your little cheerleader. I mean, I know Erin mentioned it wants to please us in her AI session, but I think that sometimes it's a good side of it. Yeah, for me, it's always just take a deep breath. And I learned this, I feel like during, like, really this hit home during virtual days, because everything was like a click of a button. And it would be with, when I talked to my team, I'd say, I'd rather you took a breath and like counted to 3 to double check you're doing the right thing than to just click and do it. And all of a sudden it's something we can't very quickly undo. And a lot of times when we have attendees who come to registration, or a speaker who's running late because they got put in a tiny car, as Mary mentioned, like, they're going to be bringing this anxious energy, this hurry up energy. And it's like, your job is to, you can validate that they might be feeling rushed, but take a beat. Don't let their energy dictate how you are reacting to the situation. And so pause, not too long because you got to jump in, but like pause, take a beat. A deep breath goes a long way. And then I'm a big fan. I just make notes. That's like, that helps my brain feel zen the minute if I can write it down, like a quick, like, couple of chicken scratch words to remind myself later. That just helps a lot.
I love it. Honestly, great tip. And our last question, Logan, what's one thing that you now always double check because of one of your haunted events?
Oh, I don't know if it doesn't align with any of my horror stories or haunting stories I shared, but I am shocked other people don't do this. But when I do a multi-day event, and I've worked some events that are 4 days, 5 days, I've even worked a 21, 25-day event. Doesn't matter if we were on day 1 or day 20, we turn everything on. Like, before doors open, before things come, it's like, I want to hear every microphone we're using. I want to turn the screens on. I want to play music. I want to hear audio from the video playing. And the number of times it would be like, oh no, you've done this this is the 21st day, Logan, we've done this every day. You never know what someone like unplugged. I had an event, somebody who was clearly probably vacuuming, unplugged our speakers because they had to plug the vacuum in, and then they never plugged the speakers back in. And like, unless we tested it, You'd never know. And this is becoming more second nature for like the larger production companies. But sometimes I find when you're working with like one tech, they're always like, it works. It's like, nope, I trust you, but also I need to hear it for myself that this is working, and we tested the clicker and we've done all these things, because that little test goes a long way in the long run. And you don't want the first time you're trying out a piece of equipment to be while you're live. Mary, how about you? What's one thing you're double checking?
For me, it's roles. So kind of getting ahead of that on pre-event, but then also on site. And so really understanding who is doing what. So for example, like if you're in a meeting and someone's like, we need chimes, then like asking, okay, who's bringing them? Like, do you have them? Like, where are they coming from? Like asking those additional questions, which seems like a lot because it's just chimes, but that's just an example. So really figuring out the roles, who is responsible for what. If that is super clear, I think we can execute better when it comes to on-site.
That's great. And hopefully, yeah, attendees, if you want to drop that in, what's something you double check? I feel like I'm seeing some folks of having signed copies of all vendor contracts. Yes, yes, yes. I would also add probably printed materials. I don't think I'll get away from those anytime soon, just in case Wi-Fi fails. But yeah, hopefully my nervous system will calm down a bit now that we've talked about stories that still haunt us. But that brings us to the end of our episode. And Mary, I have the bonus tip this week. So my bonus tip is about gaff tape, folks. Put your production hat on for a second. Gaff, Gaff, tape. It's that beautiful black tape normally that you see all your AV vendors using to tape down cables and avoid making sure things look clean. No one's tripping. Fun fact, if you didn't know, it's very expensive, like much more expensive than regular duct tape and things. And the reason they don't use a duct tape, because duct tape has the sticky residue that sticks to cables. Gaff is made of a special material that is also sticky, but doesn't leave any residue on the beautiful cables. But one thing to know, if you're working a larger event, sometimes per project, your production company has like budgeted X amount of gaff tape, and they would be like, you've already paid for it, so you get to take it with you. So not every company will do this, but I will say I had this on site. They were like, you guys paid for all these rolls. And I went, that stuff's expensive. Because I also didn't know till I bought it for myself. When I say expensive, like it can be like $20 a roll, which is pretty, a lot more than a duct tape or masking tape. So that's gaff tape, helpful, but expensive. Check out if you have already paid for it with your on-site contract, and you get to take some home with you.
That's a great bonus tip because it is a hot commodity. I'll ask vendors sometimes on site, I'm like, can I borrow it? But I'll bring it back because I know you love it. And so absolutely.
And that was
All right.
30 cents you used, Mary, that tiny piece. No, I'm just kidding.
So worth it though. Thank you for the bonus tip, Logan. And thank you everybody for listening to another episode of the Better Events podcast with us today. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Better Events Pod. You can email us at bettereventspod@gmail.com. You can also join us for the in-person day of the 2025 Better Events Conference on December 18th in Seattle by visiting bettereventspod.com/conference. We'd love you to also connect with us directly on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. And not only that, if you want even more Better Events content, you can join our paid community on Substack. And thank you so much for listening to another episode. We will be back in your feeds again next Wednesday.